Welcome back into the Final Whistle Sports Podcast. You know who I am. I am your host, Blaine Spencer. We only have two divisional breakdowns left. Today is the AFC South. I have my good friends, JT and the Don, coming on for their first time on the Final Whistle Sports Podcast. I know we've been trying to work this out for a little while now. Fellas, thank you so much. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Hope you're doing good, and thanks for having us on. Sorry you're gonna have to put up with JT, but I'll try to help you navigate the JT Blaine.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. But you see, Diva Don is already stricken. This is how he does it. He likes to come on, act like the nice guy, but you'll see how he really is. Yeah, but this should be really a fun show. We've been looking forward to coming on for a while, so we're glad to be here.
Yes,
absolutely. I can already tell the dynamic between you guys today is going to be nothing but lightning in a bottle, just full firing back at one another.
We'll see. We'll see.
We'll see. But let's jump right into our first squad that we're going to be taking a look at, and that is the team that won the AFC South a year ago. That is the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee made some interesting moves this year. They brought in Treylon Burks as they traded A.J. Brown to Philadelphia. They also drafted Malik Willis in the third round out of Liberty. Many thought he was going to be a higher draft pick than he was as he fell. The real question mark is Ryan Tannehill. How much of a leash will Tennessee give him with a very raw and athletic Malik Willis behind him? But of course, that the team runs through Derrick Henry. JT, I'm going to start with you. What do you see in Tennessee?
It's funny that we're actually talking about this because I feel like this offseason, Don and I have argued the most about this division above any other, which is strange. I like how you started off. Treylon Burks, I love that pick. I think he's the perfect replacement for A.J. Brown. They're literally receivers that are written in the same font. So he's just younger, and they're going to do pretty much the same things, those slants and breaking routes, and he's just going to catch them in yards after the catch and take it to the house. So I like that pick. Malik Willis, I don't think he'll see the field this year just because I think Tannehill's still a decent starter and they still owe him money, and I don't think Malik's ready yet, even though I thought in that draft he was the best quarterback because he's the best run-pass combination in the class. So I like his long-term upside, but not really this year. Another player I like too that's kind of flying under the radar is Austin Hooper. I thought that was a really good pickup by them. He really could start off the season as the number one option on that team, and like we forget, he went to Cleveland where all they do is just run the ball, but he's just 2 seasons removed from 75 catch, 800 plus yard season in Atlanta. So I think he's still the real deal, but overall I'm just down on this team. And I just think it's, their talent is getting older. I think last year, Don, that's the one thing he did say that I did agree on, luckiest number one seed of all time in football. And I think their window is just continuing to close. Derrick Henry carries. I think he's third in career running back touches amongst active running backs. Foot surgery, I don't like those signs. I think he's going to continue to break down. Tannehill, you already mentioned. I'm a Dolphins fan. He's starting to look like Miami Tannehill. We know how that goes. He basically fleeced the Titans out of $60 million off of 10 games. And then they're expecting Robert Woods to be 30 years old, coming off of ACL, to come in and just, dominate. And I'm like, people just don't do that. If this was Odell Beckham Jr. coming off of ACL, they wouldn't be calling it a comeback. So why should I be in on, the Bobby Trees comeback? So this just has a recipe for them to just completely disappoint, especially to where they finished last year. So I can see them probably getting 5 or 6 wins, and it wouldn't be a surprise to me.
Don, how about you?
Yeah, I think JT brings up some really good points actually. And I think naturally when you go, what were they, 12-5, I believe. When you go 12-5 without that superstar type quarterback and without like an elite all-time great defense, the next year you're bound to have some regression. So I think they're going to regress some. Now, I get the feeling what JT's alluding to is that they might not be even the second best team in that division, which there I would disagree with. So I would stop him there, even though he didn't say it, but he wants to. So I'll stop him there because, yes, there'll be some regression, but I mean, bringing in a guy like Robert Woods, and I agree with you, JT, Austin Hooper's actually like a sneaky good signing that they did. I think with those two additions to their offense, yes, losing AJ Brown is huge, and that's where the regression is going to be. But don't forget, Derrick Henry's only 28 years old, and I understand he's had a lot of carries. He, had the foot injury, and JT knows as well as anyone, I'm not a big fan of older running backs who've had a lot of carries. However, usually
he's not a fan of older running backs that have a lot of money either. So I just want to throw that out there.
It's usually like when you start to hit 30, and Derrick Henry's not quite there. Yes, he may not be the Derrick Henry of 2 or 3 years ago, but he's still going to be a force. He's still going to get his yards. The offense is still going to run through him. And as long as he's not 30 yet, I'm still fine with rolling the dice with Derrick Henry. So I think that there'll be some regression, as I mentioned, but I think the wild card here is who we forget is Mike Vrabel. To me, he is coming along. I mean, you look at his first 4 years, the guy has not been under 500. He's starting to remind me of a Mike Tomlin type guy that has a Mike Tomlin type team where it's defense, it's hard-nosed, they're gonna put the work in, and they're always gonna hover around 500 regardless if Tannehill's the quarterback. If it's a superstar quarterback, they're not going to dip below 500. And I feel like that's the way this team's going to go. Yes, they're going to regress, but don't expect them to fall off and not at least try to be playoff contenders. I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs, but they will be in the thick of it come weeks 15, 16, 17.
Well, Don, I'll say it for you. The Titans will not be making the playoffs. They are going to be on the outside looking in. I think the Mike Vrabel component is a good one, right? Because he has already shown the pedigree, even especially with that Bill Belichick type ideology with the Mike Tomlin like ego personified, right? With being able to rally the troops and like how they went 12-5 last year has to be an absolute anomaly. With all of the injuries that they went through, especially on the offensive side of the ball, you couldn't tell you other than Tannehill who was playing running back or who was on the outside for that squad. And the calling card of this team was their defensive line. And that was one thing that I think they're going to fall off a little bit. A couple of components that they've lost there on that D-line. And I'm going to make the bold prediction that Malik Willis will be playing towards the end of the year. I do. I think you're going to see the Miami Tannehill that JT brought up. And he's already got a scar and ready to shed some tears because of Miami Tannehill flashing before his eyes. But you're going to see Malik Willis because he gives something different that will complement Derrick Henry, right? How are you going to make Derrick Henry the best he can be and help him stay on the field? Limit those carries until that stretch run. I think Willis will be there by halfway through because Tannehill won't be producing early. And this is a team that's going to has to go through the gauntlet this year as the number one seed. They got to go play Kansas City. You got to play Cincinnati. You have to play Buffalo. You could make the argument there that they are going to be at least a touchdown underdog in all three of those games. And then I think personally that Tennessee is honestly best case scenario is that they're 9-8. I think they'll be right on the outside looking in. That's maybe not an issue with Tennessee as a whole, but because of the depth of the AFC. I think the AFC South is honestly a forgotten division right now because you have Indy and Tennessee that were right on the edge of the postseason last year, but the AFC has only gotten deeper this year. I have them missing out, and that's my take on it.
I actually have written down 9-8 as well because it goes back to having Vrabel. I don't see them taking that big of a hit, but like I said, I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs because I don't think they will. I've got them at 9-8. And JT, don't shake your head yes when Blaine says AFC South is a forgotten contending division because they do have some depth. Because you've been telling me a whole offseason, oh, that division is junk. Jacksonville's going to win the division.
No, I didn't.
So
that is not
when
what
Blaine
I said.
says that.
That's not what I said. See, we're already starting. See, now I know why you like Mike Vrabel so much. You guys got similar things going on. The hair, everything like that. I get it. Like
personal
I know you
attacks. Why, JT? I didn't take a personal attack.
You hope Vrabel sees this and he brings you on. I get it. But here's the thing. Two things that really worry me. I'm not saying it's out of the realm that that they could end up where you guys are, basically like a playoff fringe team. Like I can see that happening. But the reason I'm going more toward the 5 to 6 win range is two things that really bother me. You brought up a great point about the defense, both of you. That's usually their calling card. Harold Landry is out for the season, torn ACL. That's a big, big loss. Like, where does the pass rush come from on the edge? I like Byard, I like Jeffrey Simmons, but Landry is really, really a big part of that defense. And you look at Derrick Henry, I'm going to bring it up again. One, I don't like any skill position players that are coming off knee or foot injuries and they have surgery the following year. It almost never works out. And you saw it kind of when Derrick Henry came back last year. Like, he was basically just running into the line. Like, he didn't have that burst.
Because he came back too early. I mean,
Yeah,
Derrick Henry's along the lines of an Adrian Peterson.
We'll see.
Can't put it past him.
We'll see. I mean, if anybody could do it, it's him. But I mean, how many times has somebody pulled the Adrian Peterson where they tore the knee and then one day they came back, it was an MVP player?
I agree. Year. What I'm saying is, though, if anyone could repeat what Peterson did, it would be Derrick Henry.
But I look at Henry, I'm going to go back to the career touches. He's got over 1,600. The guys that are above him are Zeke and I think Melvin Gordon. But the difference that worries me with Derrick Henry is I know out of those 1,600 touches, like 98% of them are runs. So that means he's not getting those passes to take the load off him where he's not getting hit or he goes out of bounds. That means 1,600 plus times you're handing him off the ball. He's either getting tackled or he's running over a defender to get extra yards. So he's getting hit every play in a shorter time span than some of those other running backs on that list and in different ways. So you say it all the time, Don, like, running backs don't deserve money, tag them until they die. And this is why, like, Derrick Henry is the perfect example of that. And I just see the downfall. Like, Mike Vrabel, if he can get them to the playoffs, I think he should be coach of the year, because I just don't see it with this team. Like, I don't think they're really that talented. And I think last year they got lucky because Lamar Jackson went down when the Ravens would have really been the #1 seed if he would have been healthy the rest of the year.
Well, JT, just to push back on, I think the defensive component is a good one. Because I feel like Kevin Byard, someone just says he's a ball hawk. He reminds me of a lot of how Trayvon Diggs was successful last year. Very scheme fit oriented. You could see when he got burnt, he was getting burnt bad. But when he made a play, it looked like he was superhuman. So, like, I feel like Byard is he's arguably one of the better safeties in football. I think we can all three of us can agree on that. But you can also, I feel like that's the issue with secondary players nowadays, is that they're all getting burnt. And even though you're potentially one of the top premier secondary players in the league, there's still those couple plays that you're just scratching your head like, what are you doing?
Happens to Jalen Ramsey, right? I think it happened to him in the playoffs at one point.
Yeah.
Mike Evans schooled him a couple of times in that, and then, well, the Super Bowl penalty, but that was a penalty, so the T. Higgins one. So I think Tennessee's really intriguing, though.
So what is JT's final record prediction here, JT?
I think he's going to lean 6. I think he's going to go be a little bit nicer.
I said I'll give him 6 wins.
Wow.
6-11.
He'll be nice. Wow. Okay.
So,
because if I said 5, I know you'll jump down my throat.
You would think Malik Willis is in at that point, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think I do agree with you. I think he'll get PT. I think the combination of all the things we talked about and like Tannehill regressing, and I don't think Treylon Burks is going to come around in enough time to meet with Tannehill where it's like, okay, now we can make a run. So I just think they fall apart early. All the young guys start getting PT at the end, and that just looks like a 6-win team.
Wow. I don't know. I think Tennessee is going to be one of the more intriguing teams to see, because they could be right there where Don and I think they're going to be, or I think they could also easily fall off. It's going to be a lot of 50-50 games with them.
Yeah. And Blaine, that is presuming now that Henry stays healthy.
If he stays healthy, they could be top 5 in the draft.
Right. If he doesn't stay, if he does not stay healthy, it's not going to be like last year where they have other pieces that can solve the problem of Henry not being there. Right.
All right, fellas, let's jump to the next squad who finished second, and that was honestly because their quarterback couldn't learn how to throw the football in the last 2 weeks of the season, and that is the Indianapolis Colts. Sorry, I'm a Washington fan, man. I got Carson as my quarterback now. I'm so butthurt about it. So I have to rip him some way or another. But that is the Indianapolis Colts. Everyone thinks with this squad that they're always one of the best top to bottom. And this past year, we all thought that quarterback was the issue. I think we can all agree that Matt Ryan is an upgrade in comparison to Carson Wentz. And I have them as my favorites to take the division. And I think people forget that they brought in Stephon Gilmore on the outside. And that's like another squad in the AFC South that runs right through their running back. And that the engine is Jonathan Taylor. Don, let's start with you. Where do you see the Colts going this year?
Well, Blaine, not that your show needs any hot takes, but in case it does, here you can put this on loop. All right. They're going to be a playoff contender. They're going to be the division winner. They're going to be the AFC champs, obviously get to the Super Bowl. And I'm not going to say win the Super Bowl, but I do believe they will get to the Super Bowl. They have Jonathan Taylor as an MVP candidate. That defense, I still think, is underrated in my opinion, and they got better because they signed Yannick Ngakoue. And the quarterback position, which, listen, I thought Wentz was going to thrive there. I really did. And I admit, unlike JT, I admit when I'm wrong, and I missed that mark there. So, Blaine, I wish your team the best with Carson Wentz, but no doubt, you said it, Matt Ryan's an upgrade. So if you have a great defense, you have a great running game, you have a great offensive line, and now you bring in pieces like Ngakoue, Matt Ryan, who I think will be this year's Matthew Stafford. He's finally out of a place that is known to lose, and now he's going to a place that, just like the Rams, great defense. I think good coaching, not as good as McVay, but good coaching, much better run game than the Rams. And Matt Ryan knows how to win. He's not going to lose you the game. And then they're adding pieces like Stephon Gilmore, reminds me of the Rams, right? Bringing in older guys that know how to play and win. And then they brought in the young guys like Alec Pierce and Nick Cross. And JT and I had a conversation in that he felt he's not sure how the defense is going to do without Eberflus, who went to the Bears. But people forget they brought in for their defensive coordinator this year, Gus Bradley. And people forget again, he was kind of the first defensive coordinator of that Legion of Boom. He was there while they were growing up. So don't forget that before he left to become what I think the Jaguars head coach. So don't forget, this guy knows defense. He may not have been a great head coach with the Jaguars, but he knows defense. And I think the guys they lost, like no Colts fan or no Colts front office guy shedding tears over it. So they upgraded their two most important positions, quarterback and defensive line, meaning pass rusher on the edge, and Ngakoue and Matt Ryan. So I've got them going to the Super Bowl.
That is a hot take for sure, because I do not have them in the Super Bowl, which is interesting. JT, is Don on an island here? Do you have them in the Super Bowl?
Man, I mean, you want to talk about a hot take? I'll give it to him. The guy is bold. I mean, turn the AC on. It's hot for real. No, I don't agree with him, obviously. I'll say I agree with him on some things. I love the additions. Gilmore, former Defensive Player of the Year, probably. I mean, I can't name a better corner that Indy has had maybe in the past decade. So he definitely adds potential to the defense. And Ngakoue, Don and I both love him. We just can't figure out year after year how he doesn't get, a big contract. I mean, I think he's had 8 sacks at least every year he's been in the league, and he had 10 last year, and he's still flying under the
contract for some reason.
Yeah, he's like the Kirk Cousins of defensive ends, except he's not cashing out. So, I mean, you put him next to Buckner, Leonard, and Kwity Paye if he gets healthy. I like that. I like that front seven. And Matt Ryan technically should be an upgrade over Carson Wentz, but I think people are knocking Carson Wentz a little bit more than they should, because numbers-wise, he actually played really well last year. I just think him leaving Indy had more to do with like a locker room fit.
But JT, that you've always said it. That's huge. You always said it in Philly, and it showed up. You had me finally believe you in that sense, that when you saw in Indianapolis, they just kind of fell apart, and you're like, how could they go from so good to so bad so fast and then lose to Jacksonville with everything on the line? You got to start looking at either the coaching staff or the quarterback. So
and I'm glad you said that, because that's actually a perfect segue to my overall expectation for this team is they'll be exactly what they were last season. And I'll tell you why. The reason I'm not as high on the Colts as maybe Don is and maybe you are is when I look at the Colts, everyone's always like, oh, like this team is just a quarterback away. There's a quarterback away from going to the AFC Championship, going to the Super Bowl, that next Bengals team. And when I look at this team, I'm like, they're not a quarterback away, and their issues aren't a quarterback issue. It's a personnel and talent issue on offense, because you look at that team, Jonathan Taylor's great, right? Outside of him, who else is really reliable? I mean, I know everybody wants to say Michael Pittman is this great guy and he's going to do it. And, I know this is not a fantasy football show, but everybody loves him in fantasy. And
yeah, he won me my fantasy league. Thank you, Michael Pittman. Appreciate
it. But everybody is assuming like, okay, like Michael Pittman, just because he's a starter now and he's got hype and he's showing flashes, that, all right, you can just lock him in as a top 10 receiver. But let's say Pittman, becomes half of what the hype is. Then what? Who's behind him? They don't have a tight end. They have no number 2 wide receiver. And here's the thing. Matt Ryan is not that much better than Carson Wentz at this point in his career to say, you know what? He's going to mask all his deficiencies. This isn't like Tom Brady or somebody as talented as Matthew Stafford coming to the Colts, and they can mask that stuff. Also, everybody knows Jonathan Taylor is coming this year. You didn't know that last year because they didn't want to use him in a full-time role until 75% way through the season. Guess what? They know he's coming. They know you're going to run the ball. Now, can Matt Ryan throw the ball with stacked boxes? Can those receivers for the Colts get open one-on-one coverage? I'm not so sure. So that worries me, just because I don't think they have enough talent to be an AFC champion. And then the injuries worry me to some of their star players. Gilmore, I love him. He's not the healthiest. He's getting older. Whatever Leonard wants us to call, is it Shaq now? It's not Darius Leonard, it's Shaq Leonard now, whatever his name is. He's starting to worry me now too with injuries. The second year in a row, he's had some injury that's lingered, had offseason surgery. I think it was on his ankle this year. He really didn't do much through the offseason and the preseason. So I love him when he's healthy, but those kind of things worry me because the Colts don't have enough depth to survive if one of those big alpha players goes down. And that's why I have them doing exactly what they did last year. If they stay healthy, great, maybe, but the odds of that happening in the NFL are really low. So I got them at 8 and 9. I think they'll be exactly in the same boat they were at last year.
I am stunned who you think is going to win this division, man. I am, because that already.
That's what I'm saying, Blaine. It's ridiculous how he views this division. Is he poo-poos on this division? This division at the top is pretty strong, man. Like, you're not giving Tennessee and Indianapolis enough credit on how they've built. No, you just said, I don't like this roster construction. Well, you don't need to like it. What needs to produce is the results on the field, and they've had it. The offensive line is really good. Defense is really good for really both of those teams. Like,
I'm glad you brought up the O-line. Quentin Nelson, I love it. He's one of my favorite players in the league. Another player that is really injured, and when he goes down, what does that offensive line look like? Another thing is, I'll say this. I know I haven't brought this up in our discussions, but I'm gonna just say it because we're on Blaine's show, and you know what? I'm feeling good today. I just don't think Frank Reich is everything he's hyped up to be. And you've seen it. Frank Reich is supposed to be this guy that, hey, look, when he left Philly, everything turned to crap because he wasn't there.
He's on his third quarterback in 3 years.
Man, you say the same thing, JT, about Sean McVay after his first year.
Wentz was supposed to be, you know what? It's not him. It's Doug Peterson. Frank Reich was the real guy that got the most out of him. He went to Indy and it flamed out. Same coach that looked at Jonathan Taylor every day in practice was like, you know what? I'm going to let him split carries with Naheem Hines, and we'll see how this thing goes. Like, he's done questionable things that make me think, okay, like, Frank Reich either is not as good as we think we are, or he's, like, trying to get too cute at the wrong moments.
I think the Frank Reich, the Taylor take is interesting, because if Hines doesn't get hurt, I don't even think he gets that 75% of the workload that we were talking about when he gets 3/4 of the way through the year, right? Because Hines gets hurt about halfway through, and that was the component of why Taylor had to take on a bigger load. So that's an intriguing point. For me, I've got Indy winning the division, but I have them losing immediately in the first round, in the wild card round. Sorry, Don. I am way off of that Super Bowl train.
Running in defense, man. Running in defense.
Well, let's look at the AFC as a whole right now. The team, they're probably going to be the 4th best team in the AFC, right? They'll be the 4 seed. So they're either going to get stuck with for me, I have them getting the Chiefs in the first round because I have the Chiefs finishing as the 5 seed, and I think Patrick Mahomes is going to do Patrick Mahomes things to them. So I don't know, man. That you're out on a limb because you have them going through at least Kansas City or Buffalo.
But let me ask you this. If we said if I had told you it was going to be Rams Colts last year at this moment, you would have laughed at both of those picks. And you look at how they built those teams, it's really not much different in terms of how the Colts are doing it, right? The Bengals said, all right, we have our quarterback, which I know Matt Ryan is not Joe Burrow, but they felt we got to get an offensive line. They got the guys on the defensive line. The secondary is like, the secondary to me is not the greatest in Cincinnati when you got Eli Apple out there. So like, it's not the greatest, but they made up for it with the front seven. And JT just said it in his beautiful monologue about how the Colts are going to go 8-9. That I like their front seven's legit. Well, you've got a front seven on defense that's legit. You have a great offensive line. And I understand you may not think those weapons are great, but if I would have told you a year ago that the Rams would lose Robert Woods and this guy named Cooper Kupp is going to be the NFL MVP, you would be like, not even in your wildest dreams could you imagine that, because you didn't think Cooper Kupp and the Rams had that sort of talent outside of Woods and Beckel. Like they didn't even have a tight end that people.
I got to disagree with you. Like I've always thought Cooper Kupp has been good because he's flashed it before. The only thing is he's been hurt. Pittman, like you forget the one year where he missed a lot of games. He was one of the best receivers in football before he went down with Jared Goff.
Pittman is good, but what I'm saying is no one saw what Cooper Kupp was going to do. You were worried about Jamar Chase a year ago because he had the drops as a rookie.
I wasn't.
So like, yes, you were. You were. No, I wasn't. Go back and look at our IG page. You were posting.
No, I posted with somebody else. That's you can't put me in this box to paint your narrative. Look,
I'm not.
Yes, you are.
I have it. We can pull that up.
Does it say JT said it?
Out, man. Get out the receipts.
I'm about to. I don't want to
please pull them out because they're invalid.
Though this isn't even our show where I could. I don't want to make them feel bad on someone else's show.
I honestly, when it comes to Indy, we have to figure out where. Like, I think JT does have a valid point. Outside of Taylor, Pittman is the question mark. After Pittman, there's a question mark, right? I don't think Ty can't stay on the field. I don't even think he's there anymore, is he? I honestly
I think he's a free agent still.
I think he's a free agent still.
Yeah,
but see, right there is
like that's the problem with Indy.
That's
but
is that an upgrade?
If Pittman
it can't
is
be
not
worse
a stud,
at the receiving core.
You have Paris Campbell who can't stay healthy. Alec Pierce, who he's a rookie, but we'll see what he does.
Alec Pierce
have
solid slot player, very Cooper Kupp like.
Yeah, we'll see. But I'm saying, like, no tight end. It's just Jonathan Taylor. And I think they're just going to run Jonathan Taylor, and he's going to go against stack boxes until those receivers prove that they can make him pay with one-on-one coverage.
Hines going to play a lot.
He is. I think he's their slot
Hines will play a lot this year. So I think he's going to have to play the slot.
Well, but that was the same formula that got Tennessee to the AFC title game against Kansas City a few years ago. So why can't the Colts do it? And listen, regardless of what JT says about who's going to win this division, they've got 4 to 6 games. I wouldn't say the 2 Tennessee games. So they have 4 games where they should win 4 games automatically, and it shouldn't be physical compared to what maybe Baltimore or Cincinnati has to go through with like AFC North.
Don, here's my counter argument. They haven't beaten Jacksonville's beaten them once for the last 8 years.
And that's fine. But Cincinnati Bengals would always beat the Steelers too. Like it's one of those things where sometimes a team has their number, but it only takes 1 year for the Colts to be really, really good and beat them twice. So I just think it's different with Matt Ryan because Matt Ryan's going to push these guys to win a Super Bowl because this is his last shot. So, and they finally have that leader, which they haven't had a few years since Andrew Luck is gone on offense.
I agree with you on the leadership part. I think Matt Ryan is the perfect fit for that locker room. I think it's going to work in that aspect. Him and Reich they'll be buddies. They'll be at Sunday dinner together. I get it. But you see it in the preseason, and you saw it when Matt Ryan was in Atlanta. his issues are when those receivers can't get open, he struggles. And you see it in the preseason already. Like, they're not separated. They couldn't separate against Buffalo's second string defense. And what happened? He struggled. It's not like he's one of these new age quarterbacks like a Carson Wentz, maybe, that is mobile enough to move when people aren't getting open. Like, Matt Ryan's like, look, I drop back. If it's open, I throw it. If not, it's a sack. And it's like, I just really worry about the weapons on that team. And I don't think Matt Ryan at this point is good enough to overcome that. But I think just because the Colts have a good culture and I like them as a team, they can still win 8 or 9 games. And, maybe they make the playoffs, they sneak in and they go on your little Super Bowl run and you win a lot of money from Vegas. But I just don't see them winning the division. And it's because of those things we talked about. And like he said, they always find a way to lose to Jacksonville.
I think we might see 2016 Matt Ryan. I really do. Ooh, just because that Atlanta squad, they did not have the pieces really though either on that team. And that team had to score a lot because they couldn't stop a cold defensively. So I think that would be the only argument. I think this is Matt Ryan's last shot. But the real question will be, I think Colts are a real question mark next year, right? Are they going to have another quarterback for the 4th year? Like, is that a Frank Reich issue, or is that just him going all in on a new quarterback every year, right? So I think that's more of a next year question for Indianapolis. But I have them as the favorites. I think Don's got them as in the Super Bowl. So, and then JT's got them the second best team in the division. But
yeah, I got them as the second best team.
Can't wait to hear who the best team
is. I really want to know who JT's picking. I got an idea, but I already know. I don't think that'll be till the end of the show where we're going. But let's go to our third squad, and that is the Houston Texans, right? Houston, new coaching change. They're finally kind of out of the whole Deshaun Watson, whatever unfolded for them these last couple of years. With his situation, Davis Mills is their quarterback. Played solid as a third-round rookie last year. Lovie Smith comes in as the head coach. I think people thought was a kind of more of a surprise that he got the head coaching job down in Houston, but more of a stability standpoint of organization to try and get them back on track. JT, let's start with you. Where do you see the Texans doing this year?
Well, obviously, I think we can agree they're all going to be last. I think they're going to win probably like 3 or 4 games, but it's by design. So I'll give them that. The Texans are really interesting to me because I think obviously regardless of the circumstances, anytime you lose a quarterback and a player like Deshaun Watson, it's a franchise guy, you're going to go backwards because there's just not many guys with his talent level walking around. And then to make matters worse, you lose a guy who I think is a top 10 safety in Reed. You lose him. So it's a rebuild, plus you're losing young talent. And I just expect them to do what their plan is in-house, which is continue to tank for the 2023 draft. But it's interesting because they have a bunch of guys on that team that could mess it up the way the Dolphins kind of messed up the Andrew Luck thing, because I think they messed around and got some guys that can actually play. Davis Mills, I agree with you. I like him. I think he could be their starting quarterback if they just believe in him and give him the weapons. Dameon Pierce, Don's guy, he loves him. We already see what he's doing in the preseason. He could be an RB1 for the next couple of years. And then you got guys like Nico Collins and Brevin Jordan, who I think that core of guys could be good if you get 1 or 2 draft classes around them. But the only thing is, those are young guys that want to win. So how do the Texans approach playing those guys? And they might mess around and, beat Indianapolis or beat the Titans one more time than they should. And now, they're looking at the number 3 or 4 pick instead of the number 1 pick. So the Texans, it'll be really interesting to see how they approach this year. But I think they made some sneaky good additions, especially in the secondary. I thought the 3 corners they brought in, Stingley through the draft, and then Nelson and Desmond King, there goes your slot, your safety, and your 2 starting corners right there. And I think they're all really solid players that could be a decent secondary, especially in this division. But I just think they're going to do everything they can to be the worst team in football and get that number 1 pick. So I don't expect anything more than that.
Don, are they going to tank?
Yeah, I think they'll tank, but just it's an organic sort of tank. It's not like they're going to do what JT's Miami Dolphins owner tried to do, where paying off guys to try to lose games. Like that was a jab at JT, but he didn't find it
Oh, my
funny.
bad. Let me take that out.
Yeah, you're supposed to. Like, I think it's just going to be an organic tank where they're truly building for the future, but they're putting talent out there to try to win games, but at the same time to get experience. And it's also part of them rebuilding or building a strong culture in that organization and locker room. You bring in a guy like Lovie Smith, who's known to do that. Again, defensive guy, he's good, tough guy that has shown he can win games at different organizations. And Cully did a great job winning 4 games. Like, that was unbelievable how he was able to win 4 games with that team. So I think their goal is to try to repeat that, right? You never want to go 0-17, be the first team to go 0-17 or even go 1-16. Like, you want to try to repeat those 4 wins if you can. And with the draft, don't worry about it, because this quarterback class, if Davis Mills doesn't work out, this quarterback class is loaded. So I think if you're still in the top 10, you're in play. You're in play for a franchise quarterback. So I wouldn't worry about that. And if you get your 4 wins, you can end up getting a quarterback. So, but I think the thing for them is, with Deshaun gone, they can now clean up that culture again, right? Like, for 2 years, it's like they were like a team in the NCAA under investigation. Like, you can't recruit guys. Other coaches are using that against the college football team in recruiting. Like, the same thing was happening here. Like, no one knew what was going on. Who's the quarterback? What's the locker room like? So they have a chance, and they're doing it, cleaning that all up. And I like who they brought as far as young guys. Derek Stingley Jr., he's one of my favorite college players that I've seen lately. Kenyon Green, so they're building that offensive line with Tunzel already. Mechie is a great kind of hidden gem pick where they're not ready to win now, and we've all admitted that, or at least I think Blaine will as well. So why not let them rehab? Because I agree with JT, even though it pains me, like, a guy coming back from surgery always needs that additional year. So Mechie, a year from now, like, look out. 2 years from now, look out if they have that offensive line in place. Damian Pierce is their guy running, and they get that franchise quarterback. Like, look out. And adding guys like Steven Nelson, even though they lose Justin Reed, like, I think that's going to keep them competitive. But big picture wise, like, they're building it the way we've seen in the AFC South. Offensive line, they'll do it with the defense, as you saw with like Stingley. Now that's all they need to do is get that quarterback if Davis Mills is not their guy. So I've got them with only 3 wins, but it's not a terrible 3 wins.
That doesn't bother you, though? Because I feel like we talked about this last year after the first game they played. We're like, wait a minute, the Texans are actually competitive with the bad team. It was basically, they were who we thought the Jags were going to be last year, and the Jags were who we thought the Texans were going to be last year. And I'm like, do I trust the Texans to only win 4 games? Like, I don't know. Like, it's very unique how it's going.
I got Houston getting 5. I think
that's what I'm saying.
They're going to surprise people just because they have all that young talent.
But that's the thing, is they're young. So I think those games that they were in at the end last year, like, they're going to continue to lose those. So you look at that schedule, where do they get those 5 wins? Especially because JT thinks that, Jacksonville Jaguars are going to go undefeated. Like, where is Houston going to get their 5 wins?
You see what I got to deal with? His hot take was a big hidden gem, and he just goes and drops mine on the table before we get there. But even though that's not it, but I see what's going on here.
No, honestly, Houston's going to steal some games. That's how it's going to be.
That's how they played last year.
Is going to be the breakout star in the league this year.
Who's that?
Nico Collins.
I think so
too. Be an
too.
absolute stud for them.
But where do they get their 5 on that sort of schedule?
I'm about to pull up their schedule right
now. But while you're pulling that schedule up, you're talking. I get the youth thing, and you always harp on that. Youth, they got to go through their lumps. But the Bengals were young last year, and they said, you know what? Screw that. It doesn't matter. We don't have to go through pains.
Agree.
We're just gonna. Anything can happen when you get out there between those lines if you have talent. And I think the Texans have a lot of talent that could do a lot of good things. It's just people don't know them because they're on the Texans.
That's fair. All right, let's see here. I'm gonna run through this and give them 5 wins. All right. Colts opening week, they'll lose. Denver second week, they'll lose. So they'll be 0-2. They'll beat Chicago because Chicago will be the worst team in football this year. So that's 1-2. Lose to the Chargers. I think they'll beat Jacksonville. that in week 4. So that's 2-2. Losing to Raiders 2-3. I think they're going to split get Tennessee once. So that'll put them at 3 wins. They're going to beat the Giants. That'll be 4. And then they're going to beat the Commanders.
And we confident on the Chargers? Because, the Chargers could just do Chargers things and lose that game.
Yeah,
That'd be the Chargers thing to do, right?
But,
to lose to the Texans.
But also, we're just presuming all of a sudden now the Texans are going to beat the lowly teams like Chicago and the Giants. I'm sure Giant and Chicago fans right now are saying the same thing.
Texans
hey, mark that a W when the Texans come to town.
As a Washington fan, I thought they were going to be a win, but then I've watched us this year, and that's not.
Notice I didn't say the Commanders. I said Giant fans
Yeah,
and
you
Chicago
did it on purpose. I see what you did there.
I know the way Washington fans think.
The Bears, I think the Bears will be decent
every day.
You look at rock bottom, and then anything else is a progress. So. No, I think Houston's they're gonna play hard, they're gonna steal some games. All right, I gotta get your guys' take on this though. How much of convenience is it that Deshaun Watson's first game back is against Houston in Houston?
It's huge.
Don't you smell something there? The NFL just knows that,
how did they know
return?
Carolina, Cleveland, that's crazy. First weekend, Baker, that's crazy. Last year was the Jets in Carolina, Darnold facing, they know what they're doing.
Nope, something smells.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, let's jump to our final squad in this division. That is JT's Super Bowl Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm hopping in on this Don joke, so I had to. But Don, because we have JT's got them win the division, I want to hear your take first on Jacksonville. I think their biggest upgrade was bringing in Doug Peterson to hopefully groom Trevor Lawrence. They did overspend on some players like Christian Kirk. Brandon Sheriff's a nice pickup. But I think they also did overspend on some of these guys to make sure that they had them. Don, what do you look at Jacksonville?
So I'll give you the realistic version of how their season should go.
See, Blaine, I see you're giving Don a leg up. You're letting him 8 Mile me right now. You let him B Rabbit go first before Papa Doc goes, and that's just not fair.
Well, it just happened to set up that way. I thought you were gonna pick probably Tennessee or Indy to win the division, but then because I was going back and forth, each team you guys would go jump back and forth with your take first, and then you got the Houston. So then you didn't pick Houston to win. He's got to finish now the show with his hot take.
Hey,
Doc. Go ahead.
JT,
we've disagreed about this so many times, so go ahead and
if you're so confident with your pick and your opinion is so well fact-based, it shouldn't matter who goes first. So with me going first, it should actually help
from the top rope with the first bar. Oh my gosh.
So listen, they had 3 wins last year. They need to show improvement. They can't go 3 or less here. There's no doubt. And I think they will. I've got them going 5 victories. 5 because their schedule is still kind of tough. Now, Doug Peterson, I know what you guys have been saying about him, but he has to show me he's the right man for the job. I'm not sold on it yet because for all the grief we want to give Frank Reich with Carson Wentz, guess what? Peterson was the head coach. He's the offensive guy. He was with Brett Favre. He was with the West Coast offense, whatever you want to say. He didn't fix Wentz either. So until you show me he's the right guy for Trevor Lawrence, I'm not buying it. They'll get those couple upsets, but I actually don't mind that they overspent for Christian Kirk because they had to spend the money somewhere. And they had to bring some talent in because they had none last year. Etienne gets hurt. I do like Brandon Sheriff coming in, Evan Ingram. Those are fine pickups.
I didn't like them getting rid of Chenault, though. I feel like Chenault was a solid complimentary wide receiver for them.
I think they just didn't know how to use him. I think in Carolina, I think he'll basically be the backup to Christian McCaffrey. They'll use him in that same way if McCaffrey goes down. And they just didn't use him like that in Jacksonville.
Almost like a Cordell Patterson type vibe.
Yeah, like a yak guy. Get him the ball in space and let him run after the catch. Like that at Colorado, that's Don's guy.
What he
was high on Chenault when he was at Colorado, and it was for that reason.
Yeah, I've always liked him. So I didn't like them losing him, but DJ Chark, Christian Kirk, they kind of cancel each other out in a way. So I do like some of their signings, and they have a very young defense. But this is where I think they start to falter is they still don't have enough weapons this year for Trevor Lawrence. Etienne is coming off of what, JT? A foot injury? You're always worried about the next year after a guy has a foot or knee injury. So, and he's a rookie. This is his rookie year. So he's never gone through the gauntlet of 17 games against full-grown men 17 times every Sunday, dealing with media, dealing with millions. Like there's a lot of pressure there, and he's only a rookie. Now, they're in a good direction, but they're not ready to overtake the division. They don't have the mentality yet. They have a brand new staff and coach. And JT, they're just getting over Urban Meyer. And yes, they won that last game last year without Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer was only there 13 games, okay? So they're removed from him from that disaster, but it's going to take a while. Like, they're not just going to spring in there and win 9 games or even 8 games. It's going to take them a while. This is my last point. You want to knock the Colts for what kind of talent do they have? Well, let me tell you the depth chart real quick of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence, Etienne, injured, coming off injury. James Robinson, coming off an injury. Christian Kirk, we can all agree, was overpaid, even though that's fine. You've got to pay somebody. Marvin Jones Jr., Zay Jones, Evan Ingram. Like, who on that roster for a young Trevor Lawrence our defense is going to be worried about? They don't need to put 8 in the box. And they don't need to double team anyone. So tell me, in a division that has Tennessee and the Colts for defenses, where are they winning their games? I'm giving them 5. I'd be surprised if they win 5, but I just don't see how they can compete in this division yet. One day, but not this year.
JT, the floor is yours.
I don't even know if I want to do this anymore. He made me look so bad with that argument. Jesus. Where do you get all your information from? Because I just can't. I can't compete against you.
Thank goodness.
I just can't compete against you.
Now,
the funny thing is, obviously, I got the Jags winning this division, but I'm not completely out of control with the expectations because I don't have them going on this miraculous Super Bowl run and they're going to beat the Chiefs in the playoffs and all this stuff. I got them winning one more game than the Colts. I got them at 10-7. So it's going to come down to those two teams, and I just think they beat the Colts one more time to get in, pretty much like it went last year. But let's start with Urban Meyer. I disagree with you on the impact of him not being there. I guarantee if you go to Vegas and they have a bet for how many games will an NFL team win once Urban Meyer leaves, I guarantee it's at least 5. So that right there is a big adjustment. And I know you tried to downplay the weapons because we had this conversation before, like, oh, this and that and this and that. They have the best offensive weapons, if you look at it, in this division. Etienne, I know he's coming off a foot injury, but hey, he missed all of last year, and he's already looking explosive. Robinson, I do worry about, but it's still James Robinson. Like, that is probably the best 1-2 combo at running back in the division. I know you're talking about Zay Jones, but go pull up that Raiders tape from last year when they finally actually gave him a role. He was their best receiver, not named Hunter Renfrow. Like, he balled out with the Raiders last year. Marvin Jones, you're a guy, he's getting older. You love him. Great number 3. Evan Ingram played with Daniel Jones and the Giants and Jason Garrett. Like, everybody looks bad on that team. Guess what? Now he's in a new environment with better coaching. I want to see what he does. And you disrespected the person who you swore was the MVP last year on this team, and you didn't even bring him up. You want to have a chance to know who that is? You love this guy. Blaine, he said this was the best player, and everybody was disrespecting him. It's Laquan Treadwell. That's your number 5 or 6 option. Like, you laugh, and Christian Kirk, of course. Like, I think he was overpaid, but I think he's at least as good as Michael Pittman could be, like, based on what we've seen. So I look at that. That's a really good lineup for this division. I'm not saying it's the best in football, but I think it's the best in the AFC South. And they will have a different look this year, both mentally and physically, because they have all these pieces. They have the coaching. Like, how often does a team go through what the Jags went through? They get another number 1 pick. They get a coach that has a Super Bowl on his resume. And you want to talk about Doug Peterson not being the right man for that job? I'm sorry, Frank Reich hasn't exactly gotten it done since he's left Philly anyway. So you taking him to the Super Bowl, so miss me with that.
He got him to the playoffs.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, whatever. But he's supposed to go to the Super Bowl. But You're saying he's that good, but he's not.
He will.
He hasn't done it. They did make the playoffs last year, so it's invalid. Brandon Sheriff, I like, one of the best guards in football when he's healthy. Trevon Walker, I think you and I were down on him at the draft. We were saying like, hey, if he goes number one, he's a bust. And I know you gave great stats, stealing my PFF login and all that stuff, and you had all this pressure rate, which is really good stats. Like that was an awesome point by you until I went back and I looked how they were using him. They were basically rushing him from the nose tackle position, which is insane. And I think that's why he wasn't winning a lot of those one-on-one matchups, because they just wanted him to bull rush the middle and let everybody else eat. Jacksonville, they're going to put him on the edge. Him and Josh Allen are going to wreak havoc. And I think Walker is a physical freak. He just looks the part of one of those like guys that could be dominant on the edge. And you have two highly drafted guys on the edge. You got a number one overall pick at quarterback, a Super Bowl winning coach. They upgraded all the weapons. And the teams that were above you before are all being downgraded a little bit. I think it's easy to see what's going to happen here. The Jags are going to win this division. It's going to be close, but they're going to win it.
I don't have them winning the division. I've got them I think them and Houston are going to finish with 5 wins together. They're going to be holding hands, giving each other a nice little soiree. Like, hey, we were working. I think the one thing that Jacksonville's got going for them is that they will have their schedule sets up nicer than people think, right? They've got some winnable games. And again, it's going to be the very same thing with them. How many games are they going to be able to squeak by when it's in a competitive game? And I think John's point about Doug Peterson is fair, right? How are we going to see the upgrade with Trevor Lawrence? Because we saw flashes last year, but it was a lot of growing pains than what many people thought it was going to be, right? We thought he was going to be almost like instantaneous. It didn't matter who he was going to be, who he was throwing the ball to, who he was giving the ball to. But there was a lot of growing pains with him, and he could have been Davis Mills had a better year last year than Lawrence did, and that's saying something. And Mills was a 3rd-round pick when Lawrence was the number 1 overall pick. So for Jacksonville, it's not the offense that I'm concerned about. It's, are you going to be able to stop people, right? And I think JT made a valid point with Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker. I think they did mess up, and they should have just taken Hutchinson. You knew what you were going to get, but that's just my take on it. But their secondary and their linebackers are very exposable, especially in the passing game. They're gonna have to play a lot of zone and just hope that they're gonna bend but don't break, because in man coverage last year they were atrocious. That's what I see in Jacksonville, is that they're just not gonna be able to score enough points to be able to stay in a lot of these games. I think Etienne's actually gonna be in the conversation with comeback player of the year, because I think James Robinson's role he understands in Peterson's offense, that Robinson's not going to see much of the field. Etienne's that prototypical back that what he wants to see, that he can pass, he can run, he can catch, and he can still he's an underrated pass protector. So Etienne I have in the comeback player of the year conversation. I know the foot injury is something alarming, but he was not hurt in college at all. So I'm one that takes a step back in that regard. I think that is one component that's going to be interesting to see. Will Lawrence and Etienne be able to pick up right where they left off from college, which was the main reason that they were drafted together in the first place, to give Lawrence somebody that he was already familiar with. I think Etienne's going to see a lot of slot. He's going to be doing all over the field. But for me, it's the secondary with Jacksonville. I don't think they're going to be very successful, and I think that's going to really hinder their ability.
But I'll push back. You want to go ahead?
No, go ahead, JT.
No, I was going to say I like this. I like the secondary, because I think that's a valid concern. Linebackers, I think it's more of, we just don't know if the guys they were paid for in free agency are going to be good or not. We'll have to see. But secondary, I think that's a legit concern. But based on this show, like, secondary is a concern for every team in this division. So
that's valid. Everybody's got a secondary.
Yeah, everybody's got a bad secondary. And I know we talk about the Texans, and Davis Mills definitely had a great season last year. I think it's very underrated. But what's the difference between the Texans and the Jags last year? It was environment and culture. Like,
the Texans, bad culture.
Whoa.
No, hold on, time out. You just said how David Culley was a great coach, right? Like, If David
Yeah,
Culley
but they
was,
were
was
going
coaching,
through stuff. That doesn't, just because they have a
And we
strong
all
leader.
knew David Coley was a placeholder. We knew he was not going to be
but guess what? He still was a good coach. He still was a good mentor for those young players. Just because you lose doesn't mean you don't gain valuable experience. Urban Meyer was out there going to bars, not riding back with the team, cheating on his wife, kicking the kicker. Like, it was just a mess. Like, nobody can grow in that situation.
Houston was going through the same, just in a different way. They had that Deshaun Watson cloud over them the whole year.
But they had no pressure. Once Deshaun wasn't going to play, nobody expected the Texans to do anything. Where the Jags, it was like, you just got the number 1 pick in Trevor Lawrence. Urban Meyer's coming in with all this hype from college. Like, people expected them to take that next step unrealistically last year, and it just imploded. So I think that situation was way more devastating on the psyche of those teams. And you can see it. What's the first thing Etienne said when he came back in his press conferences? He's like, hey, thank God I missed last year with injury, because that was just ridiculous. Like, it just speaks to how bad it was. And I know I'm going out on a limb here because he hasn't shown it yet, but are we really sure Trevor Lawrence isn't at best the number 2 quarterback in this division? Like realistically, if you were starting a team out of these 4 quarterbacks,
absolutely.
would he not be in the top 2?
Oh, he'd be number 1 if we're starting a team.
If we're starting a team number 1, if we're talking right now, he's behind Matt.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. He's at least top 2. So
there's no doubt. No one's arguing
that. He's got to factor into it. You got a top 2 quarterback in this division. I think they have the best offensive weapons in the division, and they got the best coach. Mike Vrabel, I will put up there just because he's been great lately, but it's like, hey, Doug Peterson's been there. He got a Super Bowl. He beat Tom Brady. He did it with Nick Foles. Like, come on. Doug Peterson should be the best coach in the division.
He did it with Nick Foles, but he had a very good cohesive team that was a veteran team, and that defense was really good. But let me give you a couple stats, and then Blaine, I have a question for you.
All right.
We talk about, oh, you guys aren't worried about their offense. They scored the least amount of points last year, 253. That's less than Houston and less than the Giants. You just made fun of Daniel Jones, JT. So, and this is just a rhetoric question. Where is that new offense coming from? Because nothing has changed besides Etienne being healthy. They lose Brandon Linder, their center, who was only 30 years old. And you're bringing in Christian Kirk, but losing DJ Chark. So I don't see where the offense gets.
Rookie for center out of Kentucky. He's an absolute stud out of the SEC.
But you're basing all of this on rookies.
Brad Sheriff, and you got a Commanders fan right here will tell him he's a good guard. When he's healthy, he's really good.
You brought in Lawrence last year, and everyone says he's the franchise. He was a rookie last year. You think a rookie center is going to come in and be Marquise Pouncey? No.
So let me ask you a question. Who had a better offensive line last year, the Jags or the Texans?
I don't understand. What's that question matter? We're talking division.
Because I feel
talking division winner.
I feel like you're still talking with
Trevor Lawrence Houston.
Last year. Like, the situation is completely different. It was the worst possible scenario that can happen last year happened to the Jags. Like, everything that was the worst case scenario. So
that's good to know. You'll make excuses when Jacksonville doesn't win the division. Here's my other point I want to make. You said what? 10-7?
10-7. One more win than the Colts.
Last year's
1 or 2 wins.
Cincinnati Bengals were 10-7. So Blaine, let me ask you this. JT says they're going 10-7. The Bengals last year, for how great they were, all of the weapons they have, all of the injuries that occurred in that division, they only went 10-7 to win the division. Do you honestly believe that Jacksonville can duplicate what Cincinnati did and go 10-7 in that division with these sort of players?
I can't see it. I can, because I am more concerned about their defense. I think their wide receiving core is an upgrade with Zay Jones and with Christian Kirk. I do. The real question mark with them is that they don't have a true number 1 wide receiver, because Christian Kirk was a number 3 in Arizona, let's be honest. And then behind AJ Green and D-Hop. Then Zay Jones was also the number 3 option technically, because you go Waller, Renfro, then Zay Jones. So for offensively speaking, I think that's going to honestly maybe help Jacksonville, because I don't think defense is going to know where Trevor's going to go with the ball, because he doesn't have someone that is going to be Mr. like stands out that he's going to be their top option, right? So I think that might help them the first couple weeks of the year, because they're going to have a little bit of a trying to figure out where Jacksonville and Lawrence is going to go with the football in crunch time situations. So that helps them out to start the year, which is where I think they're going to get a couple wins. And then again, it'll fall off towards the middle of the year, and then they'll pick it back up towards the end of the year, which is where I have 5, because I think Jacksonville defense, defense has kind of become optional in the NFL. So, and it's the same with college football. It's just the way that the game is transitioning. But I don't think they're going to be able to stop many people. And I think Trayvon Walker is only going to be in on third down packages. And I don't know how often they're going to get the third down.
I just don't see how did they get 10 wins with this schedule? They have the AFC West, and then they have the AFC East, which means they've got Dallas and Philly.
And that's perfect, because AFC West, you want to talk about,
and you think they're going to beat Washington? NFL. Let me tell you something about Washington, right? Ron Rivera, hold on, Blaine. Ron Rivera and this defense is getting healthy again. Like, that is a bad combination for Doug Peterson first game going into playing a defense like that. Like Washington.
So Doug Peterson,
I don't believe they're going to be a pushover this year
in that division.
Yeah, but what does that matter when you don't have the talent you once had with the Eagles?
I think you're looking at it backwards. First, I like the way
you set up
the argument with the Bengals, because he loves to do this. The Bengals, yes, they won 10 wins, but you look at when they really took off is when the quarterbacks really started to fall off and get hurt in that division. They turned it on late. Now,
exactly, that's my point.
Get hot, but you're acting like they were like a front runner the whole year, and it's like, oh yeah, like they won 10 wins, and they were just this juggernaut all year. No, they had to find their footing, and they got hot at the right time. I'm not saying that they're Cincinnati Bengals, and the AFC North is a way tougher division. I just think the AFC South is in flux, and it's up for grabs. It was not last year. Because first of all, you can't. The Colts missing the playoffs by losing to the Jags last year. You can't tell me that the AFC South is not a division that's up for grabs. You can't tell me that, because the Colts were supposed to be so talented last year that they didn't make the playoffs. Tennessee limped into the playoffs only because Lamar went down, and Jacksonville has gotten better.
It is up for grabs. Indianapolis, Tennessee. Plain and simple.
Because they missed the grab last year. It's up for grabs for them again.
Exactly.
All right, cool.
And you said the Titans aren't as good. So it's up for grabs if they're the division champs last year.
I think the Jags got the best offense. They're the biggest wild card. I think those two divisions that they're playing in actually maybe play to their advantage, because AFC West, shootouts. Anytime you're in a shootout, anything can happen.
I want the Jaguars in a shootout. Mark my words. That's exactly what I want.
JT, I'm intrigued right now, because let's see here. I'm assuming you have them beating Washington. That has them at 1-0. Then they host Indianapolis, which is where they always beat the Colts, is when they're hosting Indy. So I'm assuming you have them getting at least that one. 2. They're at the Chargers. Are they winning that one or losing that one?
I want to say they are at Kansas City, or is Kansas City at home?
They're at Kansas City. Well, they're at the Chargers.
I think they'll lose the KC game. I think the Chargers game, I'll pull upset there. I think they'll win.
Okay, so that's 3-0 to open. Then they're at Philly.
That's the one I'm stuck on.
Okay, so let's just talk them down.
Because it's his old team, so I don't know which side is going to be more emotional.
3-1. They're hosting Houston. I'm assuming you have them beating them.
They're going to win that game.
At Indy, are they going to sweep Indianapolis then?
I think they sweep the Texans. I think they sweep the Titans. I think they split with Indy.
Okay, so 4-2. Yeah, them probably beating the Giants, correct?
I do.
5-2. They play Denver.
At Denver or at home?
No, it's in London, I think. I think it's overseas.
Oh, yeah, they're going to win that game. The Jags are the London special team. They always win.
All right, so they're 6-2. Hosting Vegas.
In Vegas?
In Jacksonville. Hosting.
In Jacksonville? Ooh, that can go either way. I'll give it. I'll make an even split. I'll give it to the Raiders, even though I think the Jazz can win that game.
All right, 6-3. Hosting Kansas City, you have them losing 6-4. Baltimore comes to Jacksonville.
That's a loss.
All right, 6-5. At Detroit.
That's a win.
7-5. And then you said you have them sweeping Tennessee.
I do.
So 8 So that's 8-5. Then they're hosting Dallas. I'm assuming that's an L.
Who's the other team that's left?
Then they're at the Jets, at Houston, at Titans. That gives you have them at 11.
He has them at 11.
No, well, here's the thing. I can see the Dallas, the Philly game, and the Raiders game, Chargers game, I think are the 50-50 games. I have them splitting the AFC West just to be fair. I think they can beat all the the NFC East teams, except for maybe Philly, because I like Philly a lot this year, and I don't know how the emotions will be in that game. The London game, I think, plays into their favor, and I see how those teams play when they come from the West Coast to the East Coast for those early games. Like you saw it last year with Kyler, like they didn't play as well, like in that first half. So I can see them getting to 10 wins. Like easily some of those games could be 50-50 games for them. Like the Chiefs, I don't think they can beat. I don't think they can beat I forgot who else was on that schedule. There's maybe 3 teams I don't think that they can beat for sure. And I think that they'll split with the Colts. Titans and Texans, I think, are getting swept.
I would put them at 11. That's crazy.
But I had two 50-50 games where I couldn't make a call, so it can easily go down to 10.
So you took it down to 10.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I honestly I still have them at 5. I have them beaten.
We're presuming a lot of that stuff. Like we're presuming to say, oh, the Chargers are going to do Chargers things. They do, but at the same time, they still end up with 9-10 wins as the Chargers. So they got to get their wins somewhere.
I got them splitting Houston. Then they beat the Jets, the Giants. That's 3. You beat the Commanders. That's 4. And then you beat Detroit. Those are 5. That's where I have them at 5.
So you got them getting swept by the AFC West and basically getting swept by the NFC East, except for the Commanders.
I have the AFC West getting 3 teams. So yeah,
okay.
He says they're going to beat the Giants.
They're going to be getting all 4 in.
Yeah. I think the Chargers is an interesting game because I also saw Baker Mayfield go out. Was that last year they went out there and they had a shoot, and that game was closer than it should have been. So the Chargers, when it's a shootout with them, I think it's scary because you even saw it last year with the Steelers. Like Ben was out there throwing for 500 yards. Like those shootout games with the Chargers are always interesting. The Raiders, I don't know what to think of them. I don't trust them to beat the Chiefs. And the Broncos game is in London. Like those London games are always weird. And the Jags are the one team that's consistently always playing over there. That's usually where they get one of their 3 or 4 wins.
That's because that's the only game that the fans will show up to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the 5, I got them winning. I've got them splitting Houston, splitting Tennessee, and then the Jets, the Giants, and Detroit. That's the 5. But, again, you got to flip it, right? The Jets in Detroit, they're going to get wins somewhere. So where do they get them?
Could be the Steelers.
It may be
could
against
be a tie.
the Jaguars. It could be against the Steelers. I'm not denying that. But it also could be against the Chargers, or they could beat the Steelers or the Jaguars, and they could beat the Jets could beat the Jaguars and the Steelers because they play well.
It could happen, but hey, that's just what I'm predicting. That's why I said I didn't have anything crazy with them going to the Super Bowl or anything like that.
They had to win the division. Nothing crazy. 11 wins.
But
I took it down to 10. Nothing crazy,
10.
Blaine.
I had them win the division by 1 win.
I think both are crazy because one of you took the Colts to the Super Bowl and the other guy took the Jets.
Hey, final question, Blaine. This will put it to rest, and I'll shut up after you answer whether it's in my favor or not.
Won't.
Blaine, money. I don't want to play with odds, right? So money on the line, all of your savings, all of your future paychecks on the line. What are you betting it on? The Colts to get to the Super Bowl or Jacksonville to win 10 and the division?
Oh, God.
What would you put it on if you had to pick? One of those 2 is going to happen, right? Someone tells you, looking in the future, one of those 2 things is going to happen.
He understood the question. You don't have to sell it more to pick the Colts.
I'm just making sure.
I am taking the Jaguars.
Oh, Blaine.
I'm taking the Jaguars because of the unknowns that are the Indianapolis Colts and the Tennessee Titans.
It's feasible.
I gotta live with the answer.
That's because I can pick 5 other teams ahead of the Colts to be in the Super Bowl.
Does that mean we get the view to
I got it.
You can go Kansas City. You can go the Chargers. You can go Baltimore.
It's a smart bet. I got you. Okay.
Baltimore, Cincinnati, and I would still put them all ahead of the Colts.
Bottom line, what Blaine is saying is the same thing I've been saying this whole time. This division is more up for grabs than people want to admit. It really is.
which is intriguing because last year I think all three of us could almost assume that we thought there was going to be two teams out of this division in the postseason, and the Colts should have been in the postseason if they could have beaten Vegas or beaten Jacksonville, right? So, which is intriguing to see. So let's just recap who we had. I have going at Colts, Titans, and then the Jaguars and Texans are tied. JT, you have Jaguars, Colts, Titans, Texans.
Correct.
Don has Colts, Titans. Did you go then Jacksonville, then Houston,
and then Houston? Okay. Yep. So
we're all in a different order, which is kind of intriguing. So
hey, look, he answered the question. Your mic is muted.
No, I want to give you. I want to give you the odds. I want to give you the odds. Maybe
see,
not as bad.
See, this is what I'm talking about. He didn't like your answer. He's going to pull up the Vegas odds.
The Colts are plus 2,500 to win the Super Bowl. So those odds are obviously high. But they're
what's Jacksonville to win the division?
Plus 700, and Houston's at plus 2,500. The Colts are minus 134.
Honestly, that's kind of embarrassing that Houston's actually still only is that high. Because I think we've all just talked about it. Like Houston's going to surprise people this year with how competitive they are.
But the Colts to win the Super Bowl at plus 2,500 is the same odds as the Eagles, and Cincinnati's only at plus 2,200. So yes, while the odds to win the division are better for Jacksonville because there's only 4 teams that can win it,
Colts odds, they only had to beat 3 other teams.
Exactly. Exactly. But the Colts odds are no different than some of the teams that are expected to possibly push for an AFC or NFC title. So I'm not that far. I'm not that crazy.
You're not that far on an island. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not on Revis Island yet.
He's just not giving up his entire life savings to go on that island with you. That's just what he's saying.
Fair enough. I got to live with the answer.
All right, fellas. I want to appreciate the two of you coming on the Final Whistle Sports Podcast. Why don't you let all my viewers know where to catch your guys' content and what's coming up for you guys next?
All right. Yes. Thank you again for having us on. You can find us, JT and the Don All Sports Podcast, all of the podcast major platforms, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as follow us on social media. Instagram's our biggest one, as well as TikTok. And what we have coming up is we'll be dropping soon our NFL preview show, just kind of a quick rundown of a little bit of everything to get you ready for the NFL season.
Sounds great. If you guys haven't yet, please go listen to their show, go like it, go follow, go do whatever, go leave a review. Everything to promote these guys. These guys do great work, and it's been a long time in the making to get you guys onto my show, so I appreciate you guys taking some time to be able to chat it up with me.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun, Blaine.
Thanks for having us on.
All right, everybody. We got one more divisional breakdown left. Be on the lookout for the AFC North. As always, I am your host, Blaine Spencer from the Final Whistle Sports Podcast, signing off.